The Dallas Cowboys run game has been awesome over the last month. But what's changed? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, I'd like to thank you for taking over for yesterday's show.
I'm glad you're back, buddy. I'm glad you're back because I just clearly can't do this without you. So
yeah, it was a rough Monday. Let's just say that, but that's okay. We're back today. I wanted to talk about the Cowboys run game because they've been awesome, Landon, over the last month. Actually, I tweeted out a stat today. Just rushing success rate through the entire season. Rico Dowdle has officially become the number one running back in success rate, jumping Derrick Henry. Rico's averaging 5 yards per carry this year. Now, it hasn't been this way all season long, but he's had some massive performances. What has changed with this Cowboys run attack where they were the worst in the NFL in the first 8 weeks of the league? Now they can't be stopped.
Listen, here's what's going to happen. I'll tell you what's changed, but none of it's going to make any sense as to why this team got better at running the football. Because here's what's changed. You lost your starting quarterback, which obviously means that you're going to be running the football more, means that every other team knows that you're going to be running the football more. That shouldn't have increased your ability to run the football. You have shuffled in and out a group of, I would say, 8 or 9 offensive linemen at certain points over the last few weeks due to injury and all sorts of other things. And you've had guys moving different positions and changing spots and all kinds of just crazy changes. And your season has kind of fallen off of a cliff, and you've got not much to play for at this point. So of course, all of those things shouldn't add up to a more successful and more efficient and more productive run game, but somehow they have. And here we are. I think if you're going to try to parse all of this, it's easy to just say, I think it's Rico Dowdle, and that Rico Dowdle has come in and gotten the more share of the run game, and that's caused the kind of
it's part of it, but it's not the entire reason why.
That's exactly right. It certainly is part of it, but that can't explain all of this because the change has been enormous, right? And I guess I think it would be easier for me to explain this if the offensive line had stayed healthy this whole season. And now we could say, okay, they started to get it. It started to internalize a little bit. They're just in sync a little bit more than they were previously. But I think that all the injuries and all the shuffling in and out, the fact that you lost a Hall of Fame right guard in the process of this, all that kind of belies that quite a bit. So this is all a long way of saying, I imagine that it's a couple different things that have happened that have caused the Cowboys run game to kind of shoot up, including the opponents they're playing. We can't rule that out as well.
I was going to say that I think that has to be a big part of it. When you play the Giants, the Panthers, the Bengals in 3 straight weeks, 3 of the worst defenses in the league, I think that certainly has an impact as well.
Certainly. But I think it also isn't enough to Rico Dowdle is the number one, has the number one success rate in the NFL. It wasn't enough to kind of vaunt him into that. And, I think what it is a combination of more Rico Dowdle, maybe a simplification of the run scheme, right? Just to kind of, get it down to its core basics, just to make everyone be able to concentrate a little bit better on what they're doing. But outside of that, it's kind of hard to parse. And frankly, like you and I were talking about before the show, the fact that it's a little bit difficult to parse is a little scary because, one of the things we've talked about with the run game is what we want to do is being able to kind of transcribe that into the 2025 season. But it's difficult to kind of lift the 2024 run game and place it in the 2025 season when you aren't 100% certain, who the most positive influence on this run game is.
Yeah. I mean, I think truthfully, there's a lot of different reasons why I think this run game has changed over the last couple of weeks. Lane, I'm looking at just again, one aspect. Rico Dowdle runs under center, right? When you're in a typical I formation. I'm going to read you by number. This is starting with week 1. 5, 3, 1, 1, 10, 2, 1, 1, 3. This is over the last 4 weeks. 7, 16, 11, 19. They're just starting to run the ball under center a little bit more. It's allowed Rico Dowdle to get downhill and start making some plays after contact. I think that certainly helps. We should also mention, like, the defense not giving up a touchdown every single drive like they did earlier in the season against the Saints and the Ravens and the Lions, like, has allowed them to stay in some of these games, and then a couple of them just get way ahead and allow Rico Dowdle to wear down some of these defenses. I don't think there's one single issue that you can pinpoint. I think it's been a collection of things, which we should remember next year. If the Cowboys happen to struggle early in the season running the ball, even if Ashton Genty is the running back, like, you have a awesome running back doesn't necessarily mean that the running game is going to work as a whole.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's a more than almost anything else, it's a collaboration of multiple players and coaches to work together to get the running game going. Because, you know, it first of all, it never is clean. It's never how you want it to be. It's never exactly how you draw it up. So the part of, you know, the ability of offensive linemen to be able to improv on the move, I think part of it is just having some more athletic offensive linemen. You know, I think there are so many like small, like miniature parts of that kind of all add into a solid positive run game that,
Yes.
and it's honestly, it sort of mirrors a lot of what happened with the Cowboys defense in a negative way, right?
Yes.
It's like death by 1,000 cuts, right? And I feel like the Cowboys run game has been improvement by I don't know what the opposite of a cut is, 1,000 healings or something. You know, it's like you're a lot of different areas are all improving at once, and it's kind of raising the ships of everything, right? So I do think that the Cowboys, if they can find a way to re-sign Rico Dowdle, they should probably be able to kind of recreate this sort of running game next year. But it certainly isn't a guarantee because we don't know who the coaching staff is going to be, and maybe the Solari is part of this, maybe McCarthy's part of this. It's an interesting kind of exercise to try to figure out exactly, you know, who's been the positive influence on this running game that's made this change these last few weeks.
Yeah, we've talked about Rico getting a contract. I think he will get one from Dallas, probably in that $4.5 million range. He only has 315 career touches in the NFL.
That's crazy, man.
It is crazy. Now he is a little bit older, so I don't think he's going to get a monster deal. But I did want to ask you about Dak when it comes to the run game, because one of the things that we've seen over the last couple of years is that Dak likes to be in shotgun. And I think Mike McCarthy prefers his quarterbacks to be in shotgun. We saw it with Aaron Rodgers. We've seen it with Dak for most of his career. Do the Cowboys just need to get back to being an under center team? Not 100% of the time, but more often on first and second down so they can have a more efficient rushing attack?
Yeah, I mean, I think they should. I mean, I think that's certainly part of one of these factors that is, you know, improved in these last few weeks. That's, you know, kind of helped raise these ships. I think that, you know, there needs to be a conversation on, you know, preferences versus what's best for the team at times with Dak. You know, I love Dak, and I think that they should be consulting with him on the offense, and he should have a heavy hand on designing the offense. But I also think that there's an area, or there's a point in which you need your head coach and your offensive coordinator to do what's best for the team. And Dak may not prefer to be under center as much. Listen, and we're speculating. We don't know this.
Totally speculating. But it does make sense with Dak's injuries to his lower body. Like, when you're under center, you just have to run a lot more. And you're a lot of times you're turning your eyes to the defense. It is easier for a quarterback to be in shotgun as a passer.
Yeah, I listen, there's a reason there's pros and cons there. There's reasons that there's 31 flavors, right? Everyone has their opinion on everything. And I think that's, you know, those are all very good reasons for why Dak has spent most of his time in the shotgun. And hell, I'll give you another reason. They've been one of the best offenses in football previous to this, and it seemed to work pretty well. So I think what's happened is that in this season, we've seen the game has changed, right? More teams are playing shell coverage. More teams are having to run the football to have success. We've seen the rise of the running back, right? And I think a lot of that has to do with attacking these two high shell teams with running attacks. And I think that the teams that are successful either have an extra running element to them, right? A la Lamar Jackson as a running back, or Jalen Hurts, right? Or both, and have a great offensive line, or they make a commitment to, establishing the run, not like, the traditional 90s football sort of way,
Right.
but like running the ball the right way when they do run the ball, right? Not just trying to, it's like when we see these guys that run 4th and 1 out of shotgun. Like, what are we even doing here? Like, sometimes we need to be under center. And if it means being under center a little bit more to improve the Cowboys run game, like overall, I think that's probably a worthy trade-off that Dak should consider going into next season.
All right, let's talk about a Trevon Diggs injury update, which is not great. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is focused on togetherness this holiday season. That means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better, and it's the perfect gift. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your live events even easier than ever before. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. One of my favorite features on the Gametime app is the all-in pricing. You can toggle this feature and it'll show you your total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Plus, you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are breaking down all the latest news surrounding the Dallas Cowboys. Let's talk about Trevon Diggs, who it was announced that he's having knee surgery late last week. We got a timeline on Sunday that this could potentially be a 8-month injury recovery. Stephen Jones said he's probably not going to be a player in training camp. And then you had Micah Parsons going on his podcast saying, basically something to the effect of, when we get Trevon and Overshown back at the end of the year, that's when we're going to be really scary. What are your thoughts on this Trevon news?
Oh, there's a lot, man. There, first of all, there's the injury itself, the timeline of everything. I mean, I would even go back to these last 2 or 3 weeks where you and I have been talking about the fact that he's been a full participant in practice, and man, he played last week, or the week before rather. But before that, he spent like 2 or 3 weeks back from the list as a healthy member, as a full participant in practice who didn't play. Right. Yeah. And I'm looking back at that now and wondering, what was the situation then? Was he still dealing with this injury? There's also been talk and whispers that the Cowboys are not thrilled with the way that Diggs handled his recovery.
And torn ACL.
Yeah, we're coming back from the ACL. So I wish we could get more clarity on what the surgery is. Right. Because to me, when I first heard it, I was like, okay, he's having some cartilage stuff. Maybe there's some loose particles in there. Maybe he's just getting a cleanup. Maybe he's just getting someone going there, a knee scope to kind of clean up some loose particles that is causing some swelling in his cartilage. Right. But it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like, an 8-month recovery. It sounds like he's not going to make training camp.
No.
Yeah. I mean, and then the Micah side of it is, disputing the timeline in which Trevon got hurt. I think he was suggesting that Trevon actually got injured back in San Francisco. That's the thing that doesn't it feels like we're hearing a whole bunch of different stuff about this injury, right? Like the Joneses were talking about how it was like we were applying with some kind of progressive, remnant of the previous injury, and Micah was implying that it happened in a game, or no, I'm sorry, Mike McCarthy implied it happened in a game and suggested like it was an injury, like a moment happened that he got injured, right? So I just would like some clarity on the situation at this point, but obviously none of the news is good. And I think everyone is dancing around, saying the M word, which is the really scary part of all this talk, honestly.
Because if it's micro fracture for a corner, it's not career ending, but it's also not great, right? Yeah. When it comes to the timelines, I just don't trust the Cowboys at all. I mean, a perfect example, take the exact same position that they had this year, Deron Bland, who broke his foot in training camp, and they said, hey, 4 to 6 weeks, could be ready for week 1, right? Or maybe he could be ready by week 2 or week 3. He ended up not being ready until week 12.
8, yeah,
10. It was later than that. 10. Yeah, I know he got hurt ahead of the Lions game, but like he wasn't close to coming back before that, right? So my guess is that Micah knows he's probably going to be a PUP guy, miss the first 4 games of the season, and then maybe evaluate from there. My question for you is, Landon, now, and this has been a lot of bad luck, right? Because they signed Trevon Diggs ahead of the 2023 season to a long-term deal. He tears his ACL during practice ahead of week 3. Now he's undergoing a second knee surgery. At what point do you think the Cowboys would consider potentially moving on from Diggs and using some of that cap to keep Deron Bland, who is a free agent after 2025?
I hate that this is part of our job here, but part of what I feel like being a Cowboys, someone who covers the Cowboys, is understanding how the news hits the wire, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
When I heard that they said that they weren't thrilled with the way that Trevon Diggs' recovery went, like that set something off in the back of my head.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's a lot like when we suddenly heard whispers that Mike McCarthy's doing a pretty good job this year. Right. It feels like I'm hearing I'm hearing Stephen Jones's words coming out of other people's mouths. Right. I don't know. I mean, I think it makes some financial sense for sure with Bland and the situation there. Would they really do that though? I mean,
it's really hard to think about it that way. But I would also say we saw Michael Gallup suffer a major knee injury and never be the same. And the Cowboys probably held on to him 1 year longer than they should have. Right. I also wonder, and feel free to talk about this, is I wonder if he's the best fit in Mike Zimmer's defense. I'm not saying he's a bad fit, but I don't think the Cowboys have been thrilled with some of the tackling stuff that's gone on in some games this year. It hasn't been all games. And then some of the other nonsense, like the Mike Leslie thing after the 49er game. I do wonder if the Cowboys would feel like, hey, let's just move on. We'll use that money to keep Jordan Lewis. We'll use that money to help maybe re-sign Deron Bland, and let's try to revamp this cornerback room.
Yeah, I mean, it makes some sense for sure, right? I totally understand, like, especially if this is a situation where, he was injured. They really don't imagine if you were the Cowboys and you like, and what they're suggesting about Trevon Diggs, like if he had actually, I don't know, wasn't as thorough in his recovery and all this. I mean, imagine how you would feel about all that, right? Like, probably not feel great, it's like, and you owe him all of this money.
So what I think I saw the numbers would be 12 million in dead cap that they would hit next year if they released him. They would save a little bit of money, but they would save a bunch of money in 2026 and beyond. Again, I'm not advocating for this at all, but I do think you at least have to have a discussion about it now if Diggs is going to miss a healthy part of the 2025 season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other part about this that really presses the issue is Deron Bland, right? Because as you mentioned, he's coming up to be a free agent. And I would hate to like have Deron Bland walk out that door. And then, you know what I'm saying? Like if you're the Cowboys and you're looking at this, like it may come down to a choice between Trevon Diggs and Deron Bland. If you feel like he didn't do a great job recovering from his ACL injury and now he's injured again, and he's having to go through the situation again, I wouldn't be shocked at all if the Cowboys were very seriously considering, hey, if we can only afford one of these, maybe it should be Deron Bland.
I mean, you think about how banged up their cornerback room has been over the last 2 years, right? Diggs torn ACL and now this knee injury. Jordan Lewis had almost a career-ending foot injury. Deron Bland had a broken foot. Kalen Carson has a shoulder that has him on the injured reserve list. Josh Butler has a torn ACL. I mean, they've just been decimated by injuries. It's hard to know what to think about this unit going into next year, because we should also mention Jordan Lewis is a free agent after this year. Like,
right.
I don't think you can go into next year with no Jordan Lewis. Do you have Deron Bland, Trevon Diggs with a bad knee? Like, something's going to have to give here.
And then on top of that, Trevon is Micah's best friend on the team. Probably.
I know.
So that plays into this, you know, in the year with Micah is also in a contract year. So yeah, it's a little bit gross right now.
All right. Speaking of Micah Parsons, let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys spin cycle, which is absolutely amazing how they can create a headline off of not a headline and turn it into a big story. Let's talk about Micah Parsons' future with the Dallas Cowboys next. The college football playoffs are here. I cannot wait. It's going to be so much fun. And with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever before, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoffs begins on December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff Kickoff Show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. Leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battle the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 7 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoffs presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL. We got the Madman Tyler Rowland. We'll kick you off in the morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. Then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. All right, so let's back up with this Micah Parsons story a little bit. So on Sunday, they had some really irresponsible reporting by Ian Rappaport. Let me just put that out there, where Stephen Jones basically says, I can't envision the Cowboys not having Micah Parsons. Like, you don't do well in the NFL getting rid of Micah, right? Which is a good answer. But he said, but all things are on the table. So, of course, what does NFL Network run? Cowboys aren't ruling out Micah Parsons' trade. So then Micah Parsons responds to it on Twitter after the game, which is having him have to answer that question after a win is ridiculous. And then you have Jerry Jones on Monday talking about how they're not trading Micah Parsons and this is kind of bogus and all that kind of stuff. What is going on here first? Like, why do the Cowboys do this themselves?
I wish I was more of a prop comic, right? And then I had brought like an organ grinder out. And that's what's happening. It's the Cowboy circus, man. It's the end of the year. The Cowboys aren't very good. They want to stay relevant. They want to stay in the conversation. Cowboys get clicks for ESPN and for all these major sports networks.
Yeah.
They're going to take whatever they can. Any kind of way that they can spin something into a story, they're going to. And look, the Joneses aren't unwilling participants in this. They are very much sometimes the ringleaders. Sometimes they're the ones grinding the organ.
100%.
So yeah, I mean that's what this is. And it's funny. I saw a friend of ours covers the Cardinals, Alec Clancy. Yeah. And did you see his tweet? He's like, man, I told y'all Micah Parsons to the Cardinals isn't unrealistic. And I just felt so bad for him because, we have to listen to the Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones nonsense all the time. I hate to give false hope to a Cardinals fan who thinks he's getting Micah Parsons because Stephen Jones and Jerry Jones may or may not have said something,
So,
but
first of all, I don't think the Cowboys are going to trade Micah Parsons. I don't even think that's been something that's been discussed. Jerry Jones even mentioned like that's never been brought up in their building. Now, Steven did mention like, hey, is it smart to allocate this much money to 3 players? Which, again, I think you can at least have that conversation and it's not wild. But I think what a lot of people are having problems with is if you were to rank Micah, CD, and Dak, not based on positional value, but just based on how good the player is, that's probably the order, right? Like Micah, CD, Dak. But because of the positional value, it's probably switched, which is why you're in the situation that you're in. My point would be like other teams have figured out how to pay 3 players at the top of the market and still be really good. One of them is in your division. Figure it out. You'll be fine.
yeah, I'm not actually concerned about this. I mean, look, I understand that we don't like Steven and Jerry Jones and they've done a lot of things that we don't like, but one thing that I think Steven Jones can do is operate a spreadsheet. Like, I mean, so I feel like if they wanted to keep Micah Parsons, they know how to do it. And look, I mean, we may not like what they end up paying these folks at times. I mean, obviously it feels like they probably could have found a way to pay CeeDee Lamb a little bit less or maybe Dak, but at the same time, well, yeah, or earlier, right? Yeah. Like at the same time, it did get done. So, and I imagine that this situation will probably be similar to that. I mean, I don't know. Like, I think Micah's situation is actually a lot cleaner than those other 2. If you're for being honest, he's the best defensive player in football. Just simply pay him at the top of the market for all defensive players. You're not having to wait and deal with like 4 other quarterbacks or waiting for quarterbacks online and then or dealing with 3 other equally talented wide receivers that are all on the market at the same time. Like to me, it's a lot. There's a lot less interference in the kind of negotiation than there was with those other 2.
Well, Micah sat down with Todd Archer ahead of the Bengals game and said like, he's not necessarily looking to be the highest paid defensive player of the year. And actually, his exact quote was, "What's the difference between 30 and 40 million?" Which
it's 2 million.
Right. But he wants to make sure that they're set up to make a run for the Super Bowl. Mike has been pretty adamant and consistent. Like he wants to have a talented team. He wants the Cowboys to be aggressive in free agency. I just wish, my hope here is, because I agree with you, they're going to get it done. Is we just don't need the circus around it like we had with the last 2. Like just get this done in March. And that way it's not a talking point all off season and we can just go on throughout our business. But for whatever reason, I think the Cowboys and Stephen Jones and Jerry Jones like the constant discussion of, hey, are they going to pay Micah? What's Micah worth? Are they going to trade him? Are they going to keep him? I just wish they would be a serious organization sometime and not do that.
I'm starting to wonder if maybe they didn't dislike what happened this last offseason for the first time, right? Like the way that all unfolded, them being the Joneses, right? I'm interested to see how this plays out. If it goes back to, I would not at all, of course, be shocked if it goes back to the same organ.
That's my expectation, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely, and that should be absolutely. But I would say this: I don't feel like they enjoyed it as much this round with the Dak and CD thing. It felt like it got way too far into the kind of animosity area of things. Maybe not between the player, but just the way the media, the fans were handling. Yeah. So I do wonder if maybe, and Micah is beloved, right? Like, I mean, so I do wonder if maybe they don't temper some of that this offseason, simply because of the way things played out this last season with CD and Dak.
I wouldn't be surprised if they're not super aggressive in free agency. So they sign Micah like the 3rd week of free agency. Like, hey, here's our big signing that you guys wanted. Look, it's right here.
Like you big deal out of it, right?
Yeah. So we'll see. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Check us out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.